Today we're going to be taking a look at this, the Flywoo X30 Superhydrophobic spray. Now this is a waterproofing spray, form of conformal coating that Flywoo have released as a simple and easy way to try and offer some protection for the electronics on your drone, pretty much anything that you want to spray. Now in this video I'm going to give you an overview of it. I'm going to walk you through how it works. We're going to test it, we're going to put some stuff underwater, and then at the very end I'm going to share with you my thoughts. Before we do that though, I do need to be crystal clear and say that Flywoo did send me this for free. They have not though paid me to make this video. They've not seen this video before it's been published, and as always my thoughts are entirely my own. Okay, so Flywoo X30, they call this a waterproof superhydrophobic invisible spray. Now, it's not really right to call this a conformal coating. It isn't the same as conformal coating. That is a coating or a liquid that goes hard that you put on your flight controllers, your electronics, that makes them water resistant. This is superhydrophobic, and if you don't know what that is basically the Rain-X effect. That effect where you see water bead and run off the surface. Rather than it just be waterproof, it actually actively repels the water from the surface, and that is exactly how this works as well. Now it comes in this box here like this. I haven't opened it. It is sealed at this moment in time. So what I'm going to do is grab me blade and we're going to go in. It does feel like there is a fair amount included in this pack. I don't know how big it is yet. We'll have a look as we open it up. There we go. You can see the spray bottle there. Now they say there's about 56.7 grams and you will use about 2.5 grams worth to spray a small flight controller 3 times on both sides. That means you get about 20 flight controller uses out of a bottle for the minis. Probably a bit less on the larger ones, but you're certainly going to get quite a lot of use from this tub. Looking around it, there really isn't a lot else to show you other than the fact of we have the lid, which is removable. There we go. And then we've got the small spray bottle. Now, just to do a bit of a demo of this here, we're going to spray this dead flight controller. You can see I've removed the H7 because I burnt it out. And what we're going to do is just use this as a bit of a test case. I'm going to give it a shake. I don't think you need to, but I'm going to do it anyway. And what I'm then going to do is spray it. I'm just going to put that down so it doesn't go all over my desk, because I don't know if it's permanent. I don't know if it's wipe offable. And what we're going to do is give a spray. 3 sprays is what I've done on there. I'm just going to give it a sniff. It is completely odorless. Can't smell anything. Literally zero smell to it whatsoever. You can see it there starting to dry. So it's definitely coated up on that IC there, and it's drying. You can see that it's gone slightly white on there now. If I give it a rub, yeah, it does seem to come off. So there's a few sprays on there now. You can see I've put a good coating on that chip there. So I just want to see what happens, how it dries, how long it takes. And then we'll start taking a look at the waterproofing behavior. Now, as you can see, it leaves a very thin effect over the surface of the board. It's not like a conformal coating that's very thick, a viscous liquid that will seal around things. It's basically like the board is water stained, actually. If you look at it, you can see the white on top of the IC there. If we look around, it certainly doesn't fill areas that there are gaps and stuff like that. As a result of that, obviously, it isn't going to offer like a complete water sealed protection, because water could still get under components where you can't spray it. If you were able to dunk your board in it, it would definitely obviously offer that kind of protection. But the nice thing is that even though we've sprayed the board, and I've sprayed over quite a lot of areas like here and here, you can solder over it. There's no problems doing that. You don't have to worry. It doesn't have any effect on the ability to solder the connections. Conformal coating, a heavy, thick one, obviously, is difficult to work with after it's been applied. But this is fine. We can still solder to those pads. There's no effect on that whatsoever. What it isn't, though, is a really thick, heavy coating like we see from some of the others. Now, just to show you that it doesn't really have an effect on soldering, what I'm going to do is go over these pads here. We've got the iron with some fresh solder. You can see we are easily able to solder onto these pads. This solder doesn't really have a lot of flux in it. So you would ideally want to apply some flux manually, but it is absolutely solderable. You can see there as I go down the pads, let me put a ball of it on. You can actually see there that it is changing color around the solder, but you can definitely solder on the pads. If I just do the same thing now with a little bit of flux, you can see that it does come up. You can see it is sort of there, but it's certainly not difficult to solder around at all. Finally, just showing it on the large pad in the corner here. I'm just going to put the iron on, get some heat into it. Get some heat into the pad, let it wet. These pads are very battered, so whilst this does look a little bit hard, it's as much about the pads than it is the stuff itself. But as you can see, soldering isn't an issue. Okay, so what we're going to do next is a little bit of dunking. Now, the board has been sprayed, it's been dried. So what we're going to do is have a look at what happens. Now, I've got myself a little syringe here, and I'm just going to drop some on. You can see that effect. Wow. Let me just roll it there so you can see it. I'm trying to do it so you can see it hit it at the same time. Let me do it from a bit higher. I might have to squirt the... Let's get in some more. I'll do it from a bit further away, so let's just pull that off a minute. Okay, so I'm going to do it from the side, and hopefully you'll get to see it here. Yeah, it just literally rolls off that surface. Just like that. Now, just to demo it in the water. Now, I haven't sprayed the back, so if I just show you the rear, first of all. So if I put it under and pull it out, you can see you've got the typical behavior on the board at the back. So that is just how it would be. Normally the water is pooling on it. But on this side, if I flip it over and pull it out, it just looks like the water just isn't touching it. It literally is just beading off. Now, obviously, this is an extreme example. But that is very cool. Very cool indeed. So, we're going to be in a situation where you're getting water hit it. It definitely is repelling it, as I said earlier, a bit like that Rain-X effect. Now, just to take a look at it on a VTX, we have one of the early HD0 ones. I've given this a few sprays on each side. I think I've done about 4 or 5 sprays. What I found myself doing was sort of going 1, 2, 3, turning it over, going 1, 2, 3, and then I sort of gave another spray. You can definitely see the sort of the white tint there on the ICs. What we're going to do is just give you a dunk test first, and then we'll just see sort of how well it holds up, in the sense of if you rub it, Will it come off? What's the situation with it there? So the first thing I'm going to do is some bead tests. So as expected, it's just flowing straight off. I wish I had a syringe here I could show you properly. But as you see there, the water beads just fall away. No issues at all. Let's do that again. Yeah, they just don't stick to it whatsoever. If we then do the dunking, so if we pop him in, bring him out, the water just falls away. It just falls away, beads away instantly, no issues at all. If we look on the back, yeah, it literally will not stick to it. There's obviously always going to be a little bit of water, but it just won't. Now, I'm just going to take a Q-tip, and what I want to see is, how permanent is this? How well does it stick? Okay, so it's not like a conformal coating where it goes very hard. You can see there that I've been able to rub it off that IC. Let me just give that a good rub. So now I've rubbed that clean, let's just have a look at what happens to the water on that. Does it still bead? Does it sit on it? Let's just put some on. Right, so it has beaded, but it is definitely, yeah, it's definitely sticking. It is not like that one there. If I do that one there, the water just falls off it. So, yeah, it will definitely rub away. So if I just sort of rub a circle in the middle of this one a second. There we go. So if I now do the dip, you can see that the water has stuck on both of them where we rubbed it off. But it is very easy to reapply. It's not particularly hard. So it's definitely more like a Rain-X than it is a permanent conformal coating. However, that isn't to say that it's going to come off if the flight controller never gets rubbed, if something never brushes up against it. What I would say is it isn't a permanent solution, but what it certainly is a nice, quick and easy solution. It's one you sort of have to worry about things a lot less than you would on something like a proper conformal coating. Don't get me wrong, I would still avoid spraying it into baro sensors. I would still make sure that you're not spraying it into UFL connectors as well, or connectors like this over here. But if you were to get it on it, it wouldn't be particularly difficult to remove. You could get in there with a toothbrush, give it a scrape around, and then reapply around it once you've got the connector on. Now, the next thing I wanted to test is how it's affected by heat. Now, I've sprayed it onto two VTXs. We have a HD0, a VTX here, and we have an Avatar HD VTX. Now, these are test bench ones. This is actually a perfectly working HD0 VTX, no problems at all, race version 1. And then I've got an old Avatar one, which does work, but I had to nick a power amplifier off it because it burned out on another one, and it was easier to fix that one than use this one. But it does actually still work on 1PA. Now, both of these have been sprayed, and both of these have been dunked a few times since spraying. Something I've noticed is that the heat seems to sort of bake the spray on a bit more actually than it does if it isn't heated. You'd have noticed earlier I was able to remove it quite easily with a Q-tip. What I have found is when you've sprayed a chip and the chip gets hot, it sort of bakes the coating onto the surface. It certainly isn't permanent. You can see it is on there. I can actually feel it on the surface. It gives a bit of a strange feel to it. But what it has done is given it a bit more bite onto the PCB, onto the components. What you're seeing on the IC there is the coating on the surface. And whilst if I rub, I can absolutely try to remove it, it isn't quite as soft to move off as it was before I baked it onto the ICs. It's certainly not a permanent coating. It's certainly not like a conformal coating that actually dries, nail varnish, all of those type of things. But what it does do is definitely sort of harden up a little bit once the board has heated up. Now, just to give you a view of how this looks under the microscope. Now, this is actually my new microscope that I'm testing here. I will have a video on this going up, actually. You might get a bit of a wobble because it's on a desk stand. However, this just gives you an indication of how this stuff looks on the board. You can see the coating all over it. It's almost like cobwebs, actually, in places when you look at it. You can see it's coated the board all in those areas, all on top of the IC. It's really like the board is water stained more than it is a complete covering. If I just flip it over to the other side, let's just have a look there. You can see it around there. You can see it around those components. It actually looks like it cracked there, which is quite interesting. If we just look, the coating looks like it's sealing around components. It looks very interesting. Oh, there's a good view. Let me just adjust the focus on that. There you go. You can see it around those ICs and those components there. You can see it around the pads on the chip as well. Again, how well it works is going to be based on how well you've sprayed it. You can actually see there seems to be a bit of a line around the IC where I haven't got in close enough to it. You can see it sort of spread a line around the whole of the outside. If I then just hop over to the blue flight controller, the first one we used, this one's had quite a few sprays now. This one is certainly a few more than it was compared to the HD0 VTX. You can see the effect of the spray there on the connection, on those components. You can see it has sealed around them, but it's so thin, obviously it's not going to seal every gap. And it sort of leaves a very thin layer on the surface. Wow, you can see it on the button there. And again, round things like that capacitor. Almost looks like spider webs. So yeah. Oh, look at it around that. You can see it there around that IC. If I come in with the tweezers, there you can see it. So that's how easy it is to come off. You can see there that it's not permanent on the surface. You do have the ability to move it around. Again, looking on the surface of those components, it doesn't bake on hard. And that really does give you sort of a good indication of how strong it is when it's installed. You can certainly easily scrape it off if you need to. Again, on the button there. It very much is like a coating, like a powder on the surface. Okay, one last test to try and see if this does what they show it does. And that is going to be with this, a HD0 Race version 1 VTX. This is a perfectly working VTX. I had no problems with this VTX prior to me doing this test. What we are going to do, and you can see there's a bit of breakup as I'm holding the cables here. That's simply because of the interference down on the connector there. What I'm going to do, though, is dunk it. So let's see, will it work? Let's take it back out. What we can see is the blue LED had gone off for the camera. Oh, look, it's come back. There we go. Should we try it again? When I dunked it, the lights and LEDs went off. But when I've pulled it back out, is it going to kick back in? Yes, it is. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's happy. There it is, look. It's back working. Can I get it to actually work underwater, I wonder? No, it does. The LED does go out. But what it shows you is when it comes out of the water, give it a shake off for a second. Let me give the camera cable a push. We might need to actually do a power reset on it. Should we power it down, power it back on? There we go. Let's do a reset. Oh, LED's on. Will we get the camera kick in? Come on. Hey, there it is. It's fine. I'm very close to the transmitter here, which isn't going to help. But what it shows is you can dunk the VTX in water, and whilst it might not work underwater, what it will do is come back and work absolutely fine. Now, as I've showed there, putting it underwater, it does power it down, but it does kick back in. The thing to understand about this coating is it is so lightweight. There is no thickness to it. It is literally like a mist on the surface. So as such, it isn't waterproofing the board. It isn't sealing areas like around your MIPI connector here. It's not even going to be sealing under the IC where all of the BGA balls are. Water is going to move around on the surface because of the coating, but it isn't a complete waterproofer. I wouldn't say this is something you want to use on a drone, that you want to literally be able to dunk in water all of the time. I think what this is a very interesting, easy to apply, water resistant coating that will help move water away in the event of water getting into your VTX, your flight stack, but also if you were to dunk it, prevent the possibility of it burning out. I'm not saying it's going to be 100%, but it's going to be a better solution than you will have without it. I don't think it is a complete replacement for conformal coating in situations where you want total waterproofing, but what it absolutely does is help move the water off the surface, stop that water sitting on the surface, that way preventing shorts, that way hopefully protecting your electronics. Now, the last big question people will have is, what is in it? Is it safe to use? Is it toxic, non-toxic? And what is the situation? Now, I have spoke to Flywoo on this, and they have confirmed at this moment in time there is no English datasheet, no sheet giving us that kind of information. They have, though, shared with me China's test reports, and they've given me the following information. The waterproof material has currently only got Chinese safety test report. It can be known from the test report that harmful substances do not exceed the standard. That would mean the Chinese standard, so that is something to bear in mind. Whilst they did say they can't go into details of what is in it, it does contain silicon, but there is no issues with regards to safety. However, at this moment in time, there is no published sheet telling us as such of what the situation is, and you have to take their word for it. As I have said in this video already, there is no odor with it. I've personally got no major concerns from anything that I've seen. It's certainly not like a chemically product that you're used to seeing from the likes of conformal coatings that may have oils and chemical based coatings. Obviously there's chemicals in it, but the kind of stuff that we've seen in the past. But what I can't tell you out and out is that it is 100% because I simply don't know. All I have is the information that they have provided. Okay, so to share with you my thoughts on the X30 spray. Now, it definitely works in the sense of it's super hydroscopic. You can see the water beads away, that Rain-X effect. The water just doesn't want to sit on the surface. It wants to be repelled. But what it isn't is a conformal coating. It's definitely a waterproofing spray. It is really fine. It really leaves very little behind. When it's on the surface, it feels a little bit rubbery, actually. When you rub it, you can feel it's on there, but it isn't permanent. If you rub it, it will come off. What it does do is give that surface that's been sprayed that Rain-X effect, and the water doesn't want to stay on it. But what it isn't is a complete waterproofing solution. What it isn't doing is sealing around ICs, sealing around connectors like a conformal coating may. It's not encasing that board in a protective coating. What you're doing is giving a waterproofing spray on the surface, which is then going to repel water. I think it is very, very interesting, and it definitely works. And as you've seen on that HD0 VTX, it left no lasting damage, but that VTX wouldn't work underwater. You could find there are flight controllers that would work underwater. That VTX wouldn't. I can say that if that VTX was conformal coated, it probably would have worked underwater. So again, there is a difference here in how this behaves compared to that. What I would say is this. If you're someone who is looking to completely seal your electronics so there's no way water is going to cause any damage, I'm not convinced this is perfect for you. This might not do what you need it to do. However, if you're someone that flies with the limited risk of water getting in, you're flying in winter, you want to offer some protection, then it is definitely going to do that. As I showed though, it isn't permanent. You're going to have to be careful when applying this. If spraying flight controllers and ESCs, what I would advise is spray them, then power them up or heat them a little bit to get it to bake on. It definitely sort of sticks a bit better once it's had a bit of temperature through it. If you don't do that, it is very easy to rub off. You're going to need to be a little careful if you're spraying your electronics before assembling. I'd be careful just grabbing them around the sides and then give it a couple of sprays once you're finished. They do say that it only takes 2 to 3 sprays to waterproof the board. However, I think you want to do more. In my testing, I was doing more like 5 sprays on each side to make sure that it was getting a good coating. I'm not saying you can't waterproof it with 2 or 3, but if you want to have a good coating on there, you're definitely going to need a few more. That obviously, though, will reduce the amount of boards that you're going to be able to do. I think if you're someone who is looking for a coating that is going to give you some additional protection that is easy to do without all of the hassle of conformal coating, this is definitely going to be worth a look. And you'll be able to top it up, a couple of sprays around the sides now and again. That should offer some additional protection as well. But where you are going to have to be careful is around things like battery straps. If your strap is over the top of your flight stack, it's going to rub it off. If your strap or wires or anything is close to the flight stack, you're going to have to be careful. As I've said, even when you bake it on with heat, it is not permanent. It can be removed. But the good thing is there's no hassle to solder with it. There's no hassle to remove it if you need to. And it definitely offers some additional waterproofing compared to what most flight controllers already have. Anyway, that is it from me on this one. If you have any questions, please do put it in the comment section below and I will try and answer them. I want to say a big thank you to Flywoo for sending this over. Very interesting indeed. And if you'd like to support the channel to allow us to keep making content like this in the future, please do consider checking out the links to my Patreon as well as buying me a coffee. It is only through the support of my Patreons I'm able to keep making content on this channel to allow me to buy hardware, allow me to do the things that I do without having to worry about manufacturers choosing not to work with us. And if you'd like to support us to allow us to keep making content like this in the future, please do consider checking it out. Anyway, that's it from me. Stay safe. I will speak to you soon.